All right. Yeah, Batman. Over here. Oh no. Okay, that was my bad. Okay. Hey everyone, my name's Emma. I'm one of the attorneys at First Defense Legal Aid. This is my colleague Ray. We're here from First Defense Legal Aid. We're going to talk a little bit about what to do if you have an interaction with law enforcement. We recognize that y'all have been here for a minute, so we'll try to move quickly so that we can get y'all out of here soon. So just a very brief background, we're First Defense Legal Aid. You may have heard of us because we used to run the jailhouse representation program at the station houses throughout Chicago. Now the Public Defender's Office takes care of that, so if you're arrested, even before you go to court, you can get an attorney to come to the station for free, and that's a service provided by the Public Defender's Office. On the back of the cards that I passed out, there is a hotline number that you can use to call those public defenders to come to the station if you're ever arrested, and we'll talk more about what the hotline does in a moment. Okay, so today we're going to talk mostly about our constitutional rights and what to do if you're stopped by law enforcement, and we're going to give you some magic phrases, and we're going to try to practice for a little bit, and we welcome y'all to jump in whenever you feel called to do so. All right, so just by a show of hands, does anyone know what their 4th, 5th, or 6th Amendment right is? All right.
I know how to play FIF.
Okay, that's one, great, okay. So he said the fifth Amendment, right? So y'all probably seen that on TV, right? They always say, I plead the 5th. When they're in court or something like that, that's it, right? But you also have that right when you're not in court. So that doesn't just apply when you're on trial, as the TV shows would like you to believe. You have that right on the streets. Anyone know what the 4th Amendment is for?
Is that search and seizure?
Yes.
Okay.
Look at you on a roll. Search and seizure. So that protects you from any unlawful searches or seizures by police officers. What about 6?
Is that due process?
No.
Not,
Close.
Let me see. Right to a lawyer.
Yes, everyone has the right to a lawyer. All right, so let's get into it. So we've already gone through these. So the 4th Amendment is the right to be free from unlawful searches and seizures. The 5th Amendment is that you don't have to incriminate yourself, or otherwise I plead the 5th. And the 6th Amendment is in all criminal proceedings, you get an attorney. Okay, do you want to talk about our first magic phrase?
Yes, first magic phrase. Once again, my name is Ray Robinson. I'm a trainer for First Defense Legal Aid. And I will be using hypotheticals, and I suggest you use a hypothetical. Well, earlier I said Batman because I don't want to talk about anything related to the law and use my true identity. Okay. First magic phrase, am I free to go? And repeat after me. Am I free to go?
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 Great, okay, great. The first magic phrase is, am I free to go? Whenever a person is stopped by law enforcement, whether they're driving, walking through the community, whatever the situation may be, law enforcement may stop you, and you do have the right to ask, am I free to go? But we have to be realistic, and we're going to do this workshop around being realistic and practical, like dealing with real life experiences. Great example, and I want you guys to engage with us during this quick workshop. Okay, I'm on the block, and I see my guys across the street, and they're over there smoking, and they hustling, and they chilling, playing music. So I walk up, I'm like, hey, man, what's up, man? Yeah, we clapping up. Police pull up, whoop! Don't nobody move. So I stand still, I don't move. And they get out, and they start to look on the ground and everything. Is that the right time to ask, am I free to go?
No.
Okay, give me a reason why.
They haven't asked you?
No, it's not a right or wrong answer.
Because they haven't asked you anything, I don't know.
Okay,
I feel I haven't did anything, I should be able to go.
okay, is that a good time to ask, am I free to go?
Yes.
Okay, anyone else? Anyone else? Okay, great. So, give them an example when it's a good time to ask, am I free to go? And is there a good time or a right time to ask, am I free to go?
So I think that's a trick question because there's no right time, right? The right time is when it feels right for you, right? Everybody is going to have a different perception of safety. Everyone has different risk factors when interacting with law enforcement. And so in Batman's situation or any other situation, right, it's on you to figure out whether you feel like you're free to go. Go ahead.
And then what you're saying is, when you told us to say I'm free to go, and the word what we use out here, are you detaining me?
Okay, great. So the reality is,
the same thing?
yes. The reality is this right here. Let me say this to you. We educate people. Our main priority in educating people is we want you to survive the encounter. Number one, comply and complain later. And you're not going to beat them on the spot. Now, realistically speaking, if they pull up on Batman in that situation and they start to shine their light or say whatever they're looking around, Batman gonna say this is not a right time to ask am I free to go, only because I don't want to aggravate the police officers. I don't want to make a bad situation turn to a worse situation, right? So I'm gonna give it a few minutes. I'm talking about being practical and realistic. So moving right along, am I free to go?
Am I free to go?
That's we. Am I free to go?
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 I don't think so. No, I'm just so. Anyway, okay.
One real important thing I just want to cover here. So we have this middle box here where it says if you're unsure, or if you say, am I free to go? And the cop says, did you watch the game last night? Or what are you doing over here, right? They don't give you a yes or no answer. You're probably going to assume that you're not free to go, right? Unless you get a verbal, yes, you're free to go, it is in your best legal interest to assume you are not free to go. Because if you're free to go, they will tell you. And the second thing is, if you are free to go, you are going to walk calmly away. Unfortunately, under the law, if you run away from a police officer, even after they say you're free to go, that can give them probable cause to chase you and detain you and arrest you. So you want to make sure, and this is really hard in practice, that you turn around and you walk calmly away instead of running.
Yes, I just want to add.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Joy.
If you're unsure whether you're free to go and you assume that you're in custody and invoke your rights, what does that look like, invoking your rights?
We will get there.
Okay,
We're
so
almost there.
what she just explained was true and exact. And if they say that you're free to go, you don't say, yeah, I got them chumps, Jack, yeah, you see, man, F them, yeah. So I'm being realistic, right? And you don't want to look back and be like, you just want to just walk off. Walk straight, don't run, and also share this with any young women or men in the community and family. And if everybody else is acting up during this experience, you don't act up. You don't act up.
All right, so this is our second magic phrase here. This is part of invoking your rights.
I will not talk, I want my lawyer.
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 Right. You want to read that for me?
Sure. So when you say that you're not going to talk and you want your lawyer, you're invoking your Fifth and your Sixth Amendment rights. Remember, you don't have to be in a courtroom to assert your Fifth Amendment right. I know that that's something that the TV tries to teach us. You don't even need to be at the police station to invoke these rights. You can be anywhere in the world, well, no, anywhere in Chicago and invoke these rights, right? The final piece of this, actually, does anyone know, maybe non-attorneys, does anyone know when the police are supposed to read you your Miranda rights?
When you're under arrest.
Okay, so like when they handcuff you?
I thought they do a wild handcuffing you.
Yeah.
At least that's what I see on the movies.
Is that what they that's what Dick Wolf would have you believe. So
You really did when you really guilty. That's what they should have been. They got you really guilty. They got your camera left and right. That's when you read my rights.
So actually, Dick Wolf is wrong, the TV is wrong. They don't have to read you your Miranda rights while they're handcuffing you. So we get a lot of these calls to our hotline to try to report civil rights violations by the police where people are like, I was arrested and they didn't read my Miranda rights until I was at the station, like I want to sue them. And those are such hard phone calls because that's not actually against the law. When they have to read you your Miranda rights is when they're doing something called a custodial interrogation, which means they're questioning you and you're detained. So you're not free to go and they're asking you questions. So usually that doesn't happen until you're at the station. So what's really, really important is that folks assert this, I will not talk, I want my lawyer, before you even get there, right? So even when they're not Mirandizing you or telling you what your rights are, you're asserting this beforehand because the Miranda rights aren't gonna come up until later and you can assert your rights at any time. So that's what I wanted to say about that. Yeah, go ahead.
Also, we know law enforcement will lie to you, but you shouldn't lie to them. And once again, shares information went into youth, family members, whatsoever, because they can be very manipulative and very tricky, and they can be an intimidating force. Great example. After they tell you that you're not free to go, your Miranda rights kick in, they say, hey, who do you think the best between Michael Jordan and LeBron James? Hey, you know, I went to school with your father. Hey, what's your sister's name again? You know, they be very manipulative. And I put emphasis on sharing this information with the youth. No matter what, stick to your guns. I will not talk, I want my lawyer. And if you happen to be taken into the station, still re-invoke your rights. You need to use the bathroom, make phone calls, need medication, whatsoever, still re-invoke your rights. No matter what. I will not talk, I want my lawyer. I will not talk, I want my lawyer.
Okay.
Any questions?
I will not talk, I want my lawyer.
Yes.
Hey, I'll give you $1 million.
Good job. Good job. All right.
Okay.
So yeah, that leads us right over to here. Go ahead.
Okay, and remain silent. Remain silent. After you invoke your rights, remain silent. No matter what. You want to read that? What do you want to read?
Sure. I mean, yeah. So I think you covered it already. Just
Okay.
anytime you're asking them for something, you have a right to all these things, right? All the things that Ray said. We'll talk more about phone calls later. But you have the right to use the bathroom. You have the right to ask for water, for food, for medication, all of those things. And you should ask for them. And we're not saying don't ask for them. Ask for them. Don't say anything else, and then re-invoke your rights because the police will and have used this as an excuse to slip in some more questions, right? In various ways. If you don't re-invoke, there may be some discrepancies with a case later, so you want to just make sure, I want some water, but I will not talk, I want my lawyer, right? Make it quick and easy, simple. One thing I want to highlight is it's really important that these phrases, somebody mentioned that, I know in Chicago we do say like, why am I being detained or am I detained? It's important to use the phrases as we write them here. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of case law over the years that has come up because of the way that we interact with law enforcement, especially in Chicago, that has come up and kind of required us to use these very specific terms. I'm going to tell you a really brief, funny story that's not actually funny. But there's actually a Supreme Court case where somebody said, I will not talk, I want my lawyer dog. Do you think the Supreme Court decided that he asked for a lawyer?
He said dog? Like,
Yeah, at the end, I want my lawyer dog.
Oh, okay, yeah. Right.
Yep, so they said you didn't ask for a lawyer, you asked for a lawyer dog.
Right.
So that's the type of dumb stuff
Right.
that's happening. So that's why I just wanted to highlight that and that's why we pass out these cards too, and feel free to take more, there's more on the table if you want to pass them out. But that's why we pass the cards out, is so that you can practice these exact phrases, because unfortunately, the law is against us, right? So we want to make sure that we're protecting our rights and not giving them any room to try to wiggle out of it. All right.
I do not consent to any searches.
I do not consent to any searches.
Earlier today, the two presenters talked a lot about this right here. So you want to read through this? Or
Sure.
Pretty much
Yeah, this goes for any situation, right? So whether you're in a car, whether you're walking down the street, whether you're in your house, this phrase applies to all those situations. I even don't care whether they say they have a warrant. I don't care if they say they know you did it, they saw you on camera. I want you to say I do not consent to any searches, regardless, okay? And the reason for that is, like Ray said, they can and they do lie, right? They have the right to do that under the law. There is no penalty for them lying to you, no matter what the lie is. And they also make mistakes, right? We've seen on the news recently of police officers going into somebody's house with a warrant that wasn't for the right house, right? That's a reality that we're all experiencing. And so even in that situation, right? Even in a situation where you're like, oh shoot, I think that they probably can search me. I still want you to say it, because even if it's a 1% chance that they didn't have the right, at least you protected yourself, right? You don't want your silence to be interpreted as consent. So I always say to say this, regardless of the situation, regardless of what they're saying they have against you, regardless of what you think they have against you, in any situation. And then I want to talk real quick. We talked a little bit about Terry stops or stop and frisk during ACLU and Joy's presentation and how that correlates with the increase in traffic stops. So they can still do these investigatory pat-downs. They have a lot more work to do after they do them, which is why sometimes they won't do them, but they're still doing them. And y'all may have come into a contact with an officer on the streets asking if you have a gun and then trying to pat you down. That is something that they are allowed to do. I still recommend as a lawyer to say I do not consent to any searches in that situation, because what will happen is in this situation, in a pat-down situation for officer protection, they're only supposed to go like this, right, on your pockets. But they're not supposed to go in your pockets. So if they feel something, like I have my phone here, they're not supposed to go in and grab my phone out of my pocket. They're looking for weapons. So unless they feel a weapon, a needle, a knife, a gun, an actual weapon in your pockets or something that can harm them, they're not supposed to be going in your pockets. But as y'all know, probably, if you've ever experienced this or know someone that's experienced this, they often always do go in the pockets, regardless of whether there's a weapon that they feel. So always use that, and just know that unfortunately there is that loophole in the law that does allow them to pat you down over your clothing, but it's a very small piece of the law that they're supposed to only be looking for weapons. Yeah, go ahead.
Now, is it okay for a male officer to pat you down as a female, or can you request for a female?
So I always say request a female. Everybody has a different comfort level, and same thing with men too. I've had situations where clients were like kind of invasively patted down by a woman officer, and like that can be really intimidating, or there's a woman officer right there when they're like going in your pants and stuff, and that can be really intimidating. You can assert that right. What I would say is that you may not get it, but I would always assert that right? I've heard a lot of we don't have one close enough, so she can't come right now, or, whatever they're gonna say, so. But yeah, I mean, as a woman, I think we do, I won't get into the nitty-gritty of the sexual assault stuff, but, okay, let's go into identifying information. You want me to go? Oh, okay. So, generally, you're not obligated to give police information except your name and your address. In Illinois, unfortunately, we're one of the states where the police are allowed to stop and ask you to identify yourselves. Not all states have this. I think it's a very silly law, but you do have to give your name and your address, but you do not have to give them your ID. And I know from experience that when this has happened to me, they have always asked me for my ID. They never ask me for my name and my address. They always say, let me see your ID.
Unless you're driving a car.
Right.
In which case you have to turn over your driver's
Yes, and we will talk about the differences. But yes. So this, I guess I should have clarified. This is for when you're walking down the streets. But this is something, I've lived here my whole life, and this has happened to me a few times where I've just been walking with my friends and they've said, everybody give us your IDs. But I didn't know back then that I only had to give my name and my address. So next thing I know, I'm giving them like all my identifying information, my date of birth, they can look me up in the system now, all that kind of stuff. So you don't actually have to give your ID. Sometimes, for safety factors, it's easier to just give your ID, or you feel safer just giving your ID, then you don't have to talk at all, right? Because as we've talked about before, remaining silent is really, really crucial in these moments. So this is one of those, feel it out situations, how you feel. If you feel it's safe for you to just say, this is my name and this is my address, and try to move along, But if they're really, you know, getting aggressive with you and they're like, no, you have to show me your ID, and you feel like you're not safe or you're not free to go, you know, you can always hand over your ID. But we just say this because there's lots of situations where individuals might not want to give their ID. And we have to recognize that, right? Like if you're on a database, you think you're on a database, immigration status can come into play here. Lots of reasons why folks might not want to give their ID. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say, doing any type of stop, make sure you know, if you're not too nervous, we talk about breathing, trying to relax, do the best you can to remain calm, and always remember the officer name, and if you can, his badge number. Mostly his badge number more than anything else. And when it comes down to identification, I give them my ID on the street. Unfortunately, I would strongly suggest comply and complain later, because like I said, you don't want to turn a bad situation into a worse situation. And also, moving right along, when you going around, okay, let me just say right here. Anybody remember the Central Park 5?
Yes.
When they see us?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so once again, if you have any youth, any young adults, let them know, no matter what, great example, they would take the youth into the police station. Oh, what about the minor? Okay, if you're a minor, only identifying information, you got, only information you give them is your guardian or your parents' information to call, to contact, let them contact them. But what they would do is say, look, we're gonna let you go. What we need you to do is just sign this piece of paper, we're gonna let you out the back door. And what they normally end up doing is typing in a statement. And now they have a signed statement by either an adult or a youth. And the reason why I brought up the Central Park 5 is because the reason why they went through such a horrible experience, because none of them had access to this information, and now they did the parent. The parent was telling his child during interrogation to talk to police and tell them whatever. And unfortunately, it damaged their lives to a deep degree. So it's very important that we share this information, and information when our application brings on transformation, it's just not about knowing this information, it's about actually applying it in the due time, in due course.
Yeah, so that's really important about minors, right? They have a right to have their parent or guardian called, but it is not a requirement that they wait for you to get there. It is not a requirement that they actually get in touch with you. The only requirement is that they place that phone call. So what I always say is that minors should give parent and guardian's phone numbers so that parents can know where they are, but they also should then call their lawyer, right? And they can call 1-800-LAW-REP4, which is on the back of all those cards. And the reason for that is because of exactly what Ray said, right? All well-meaning parents don't want their kids to get into a situation like that young man did in the Central Park 5, right? And his dad in no way was trying to get him arrested, right? He was trying to get him out of it. And all well-meaning parents are going to do something like that because they think that they can help their child. The unfortunate situation is the police will manipulate not only the child but also the parent, and so having a lawyer there is one of the most important things, regardless of whether you as the parent is there or not. You know, I always recommend parent and lawyer is really important. I think that's good. So we can talk about the finding a lawyer, but I don't know if folks have questions. Oh, you know what? Let's talk about the car stuff real quick because Alexandra brought up a good point. So when you are in the car, if you're in the driver's seat of the car, you have to show your driver's license to a police officer if they ask. What about if you're the passenger?
No.
That's right. You do not have to. The only time that I have ever heard of a legitimate reason for someone having to show their ID as a passenger is when that passenger was not wearing their seatbelt. Because then the officer has probable cause to write you a ticket. So, if you're wearing your seatbelt in the passenger seat, and it doesn't matter, honestly it doesn't matter what you're doing in the passenger seat, to be quite honest with you. But you do not have to give them your ID. Now, Ray and I are going to talk about what it's really going to be like when you're in that situation, right? If you get pulled over, the police are going to say, everybody give me your IDs. And they're probably going to say, get out of the car.
Yeah.
Do you have to get out of the car if a police officer asks you to?
Yes.
What if you didn't do anything?
You still gotta get out.
He said comply anyway. Comply. First thing he said, comply.
I would strongly say, so we know that unfortunately, generation historically, we know that when you don't comply, whether you're in the right or not, when you don't do certain things, it can turn out disastrous. And we just want people to survive the encounter no matter what. Whether they take you or not, we want to educate you on how to survive the encounter.
Yeah, and I will say, so just for the record, under the law, if you are in the driver's seat of the car, you have to get out of the car when the police officer asks you to, okay? In any situation, regardless of whether you did nothing, regardless of what questions he's already asked you or hasn't asked you, you have to get out of the car. You don't have to let them search your car though. So I recommend, if it's possible and safe, lock your car door before you close it behind you. You can do it real slick and just close the car door, right? And then you're gonna assert your rights and you're gonna say, I will not talk, I want my lawyer, and I do not consent to any searches. That's it, okay? This situation here, there's a misconception in Chicago at least, that people think they don't have to get out of the car when a police officer asks them to. And I have watched way too many body cam videos of people that have tried to assert that right to say, I do not have to get out of the car, and it escalates terribly, right? Just that single thing of saying, no, I don't want to get out of the car has caused people's windows to get broken, people's arms to get broken, pulling people out of the car, right? So this is one of the #1 ways that I see personally in my work that traffic stops are starting to get violent, right? It's from that moment. And I don't know if it's a tactic that they're using or what, but this is something that I want folks to be really clear on is like what's your saying here?
Comply and complain later.
Okay, so you're gonna get out the car, you're gonna assert your rights, and you're not gonna do anything else, right? But you're not gonna argue with them about whether or not you need to get out of the car, because I can promise you that's gonna escalate it. And then you have to give them your driver's license, and in Illinois, your insurance and your registration. I mean, that's most of the stuff that the driver. And then in terms of passengers, in reality, right, you don't have to get out of the car. It's usually safer for most folks to get out of the car because, like I said, they get aggressive. They don't like when people say no to them, and we've seen a lot of those encounters turn violent in that way. So, you know, do what Ray says, comply and complain later. If you assert all your rights, you can definitely call this number right up here. And somebody from my office will answer that phone call. It's a 24/7 hotline. You can report all of your civil rights violations to that number, and we can help you try to sue the police if your rights have been violated.
Right, so are you guys familiar with the Pretrial Offenders Act, the Safety Act? No more cash bail here in the state of Illinois for any criminal cases? Okay, just really fast. So I'm on a subcommittee called Notice and Summons. That means now, for like I say A, B, or C misdemeanors or probably small levels of felonies, they were not taken to the station. If you have identifying information like an ID or whatever, they can write you a notice or a summons to appear in court. And if it's the individual's decision to want to communicate with law enforcement, you communicate the exact information but still re-invoke your rights. You don't talk about what happened or whatever, you just keep it really simple. So I would strongly suggest you guys look up that. There's no more cash bail for criminal cases in the state of Illinois. So if your loved one, someone goes to jail, then you go bond them out, you can no longer bond out 1 hour cash on the Pretrial Offenders Act. It was passed, the second part of it was passed September the 18th of this past September. So just some information.
So can you explain that more?
Which one? The Pretrial Fairness Act?
No cash bail.
Yeah, that's part of the pretrial. That was the crux of it all. There's no more cash bail. That means you can't bind out with cash no more in the state of North for criminal cases.
Yeah. Part of it, what it's seeking to do is to alleviate the minor burden that a lot of people have faced when they go to jail and they can't afford, say, like $500 to $1,000 bonds, things like that. What it also does is, for, again, minor criminal cases, some could be looked at as some more moderate crimes, but what they do is, if you're not a flight risk, if you're not somebody that they believe that even if you committed, it could be a violent act, and you're not going to flee persecution, they will give you a court date and tell you to come back, so you don't go to jail. So that way it alleviates the bail.
If you're a public safety threat. You know, it's just beginning working. It's just beginning working, but this information is vital, especially right now with that, because now if you stop up on the pretrial offense act with a small felony, small misdemeanor, it's going to be some level of conversation. But one thing you don't get into is what happened.
Alexander.
Okay, that's the one.
We got Alexander.
Sorry, can I just add two things to the rules about cars? Were you going to talk more about that, or can I just jump in? Because I think there are two things that are really important that are kind of exceptions to what you're saying. If you hold a concealed carry license for a firearm, you do have to answer a question from a police officer who asks you, do you have a gun in the car?
Yeah.
That is one of the only times that you actually do have to answer a question before you invoke your right to remain silent for every other question. But I've seen situations where police officers say, you got a gun in the car, and the person says, well, why are you asking? Like, I've got a right, you know, why are you asking me? That is one of the situations, just like Emma said, that will cause it to go from 0 to 60 and escalate, and they will pull you out of the car, and they will say you're obstructing, and they will say you violated the concealed carry license law if you don't immediately tell them, yes, here's my CCL license, I will show you a copy, and the gun is stored properly in, you know, the trunk or wherever. So you do have to answer that question.
That's a really important part too, right? What I'm seeing actually is a lot of times people will admit to having a CCL and the gun's not stored the way it's supposed to be, because there's very, very specific rules about how you're allowed to transport weapons, even though you're allowed to have them. So it's kind of a double-edged sword in that regard. So, you know, you need to say yes, but you also need to make sure that if you are going to travel with it, that you make sure it's stored properly before you get in the car.
Yeah, that's very important to make sure it's stored properly. Unfortunately, if you have a right to conceal and carry, you have a weapon that's not in the right area that it needs to be in, if law enforcement wants you to get it, you're going to make sure you got their badge name, the badge number, their name, and ask them how their camera's on, or you tell them to get it. You know, if you know, you tell them to get it. You don't reach for no gun. You know what I'm saying? If their cameras not on or whatever, because we know for a few months ago, so the guy was in the car with his girlfriend or whatever, and he had a car, he had a gun or whatever, and they just shot him up. You know what I mean? They just shot him up. You know, so let me say this too. None of this is a magic bullet. None of this is an absolute. You're gonna come out on top. You have a better chance of coming out on top by applying this information as opposed to not. So this is not a magic bullet, but it'll be in your benefit if you apply the information we just shared with you.
I appreciate y'all coming up there saying what y'all said. That's really nice. I learned a lot.
Yeah, the one last thing I want to say is that everyone has the right to 3 phone calls when they've been arrested within the first 3 hours of their arrest. 3 phone calls. You get 3 phone calls within the first 3 hours of your arrest. And if you or anyone you know has not gotten those phone calls, you can, on the back of the cards that I passed out, there's a QR code. If you scan that QR code, there's a complaint form that you can use to let us know that that's not happening. We're part of the consent decree compliance. So we're making sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing with that. Thank you all so much for staying later and for being here today. We really appreciated it. And feel free to stop us if you have questions later.
Is that it? Okay.
Yeah.